Chapter 9, Around the World. Many people wrote Helen letters of sympathy. One from a stranger began, "I know, dear Helen Keller, your heart is crying out for the loved one. Our only comfort is to do what good we can in this world." Helen was deeply touched. She felt as if Annie's own words were reaching her through the stranger's letter. "We must stop feeling sad and get back to work," she told Polly. Soon afterwards, an important telegram came. The Japanese government asked Helen to help start work for their blind and deaf. That meant a long trip across the Pacific Ocean. Helen knew she must give many speeches. "I cannot say no," Helen said. "There are many thousands of deaf and blind children in Japan. Most of them have no teachers. We must raise money to start schools for them, just as we're doing in America." On the ship, crossing the ocean, Helen wrote the speeches she would give in Japan. She and Polly got up at 5 o'clock each morning to go out on deck alone. Then Helen would practice her speeches so Polly could tell her if her voice sounded right. In Japan, crowds greeted Helen. They threw flowers in front of her car. Best of all, Helen liked the children who gathered around to greet her. When it was time to leave, Helen and Polly had raised enough money to begin the new schools. The Japanese government thanked them. The Emperor of Japan sent a grateful message. At home again, Helen was busy. Her desk was piled high with letters to answer. Many parents who had blind or deaf children wrote to Helen for advice. She answered them all. And there's Helen and her helper Polly. So Helen is the older woman with the flowers. And you can see the Japanese children around them. Helen was proud of the children she had helped. Tommy Stringer, the blind deaf boy, was now a tall, strong man. He earned his living as a carpenter. He had a family of his own. One day, a friend of Helen's came home from a walk. "I did not see anything interesting," she said. Helen was amazed. It made her think how much she wished she could see, even for a little while. Later, she wrote a magazine article called, "If I Had 3 Days to See." Helen wrote that first she would want to see the faces of her family and friends she loved. Then she wanted to see her house and her books and her dogs. She would go for a long walk through the woods. She wished that she could see a sunset and children playing in the moon and stars. She wanted to see a stage play and a funny movie. While Helen worked, she thought of Teacher's empty room next to her study. It made her feel lonely again. Soon she and Polly moved to a new house in Westport, Connecticut. The shadow of war was over the country again. Fighting had begun in Europe. America entered the war in 1941. Helen and Polly were sad that Japan was now America's enemy. They remembered their Japanese friends. Many soldiers and sailors were blinded in the fighting. President Roosevelt asked Helen to visit them. She traveled to hospitals all over the country. "You can learn to read and to work again," she told the men. "You must learn to be a part of the world and not outside of it." Her words and gentle touch brought them new courage and hope.